Please welcome Peter Watts.
Do you want to get a drink or anything?
Do you want a drink?
Does anyone else want to get a drink?
That's right.
Do you want a
We're
break
going
in
to
between?
go through. We're going to go through.
Don't worry. Push straight through.
Push straight through, then everyone can get larruped afterwards.
Okay. Right. Hello. So, I'm talking about shrines. I printed out some photographs, not realising there'd be 90 of you. So, people at the front 2 rows will have a nice view of these. Everyone else will have to
Pass them back.
keep looking at that.
Pass them back.
I'm talking about shrines. I don't know if they're sacred, I don't know if they're profane. They're just shrines. When I started thinking about shrines, I was trying to think about sort of things that connect various kinds of shrine in London. And I started thinking about the flowers that you get after someone's been stabbed or there's been a crash or something on tied around lampposts. And then I thought about the bicycles you get when there's been a bike crash. And then I thought about the biggest sort of version of that I've ever seen. And I was talking about it beforehand with Caroline about when Princess Diana died. And a friend of mine, I was in my 20s, and a friend of mine said, "You've got to go down to Kensington Palace, you've got to go and see what's going on down here." And I was sort of anti-monarchy and a bit left and just wasn't really interested. But he said, "You know, this is something that you're never going to see again in your lifetime." And we walked through Hyde Park, and the nearer you got to Kensington Palace, the more you could sort of smell this thing starting to rise through the air. And then you sort of got through the trees and you got outside the palace, and it was just a carpet of flowers. It was like waist high, and it just stank of the flowers are rotting. It was really hot. And there were people kind of walking around looking at labels, and they looked like kind of like peasants in a field, like or bomb disposal experts or something, kind of looking at these things. And it was incredibly powerful. It was something I'd never seen or experienced before. And what interested me about it was that it was kind of seditious. There was a sort of outlaw aspect to this. When Diana died, there was a lot of talk in the press about how the royal family wasn't paying enough respect to how the people felt about her. And this was like the people's kind of response to that, and it was kind of, in a strange way, given that it was outside a palace, it was very anti-establishment, and it just really interested me. It was almost revolutionary, the act, and I found it was a really fascinating combination of things. You've got the kind of privacy of remembrance carried out on a very large scale with sort of political implications, and sort of putting all that together, I thought maybe these are the key elements of a shrine. They've got to be about a person who's been kind of martyred, or their life has been cut short, in hopefully a really violent way. But they've also got to be kind of a sort of plebeian or proletariat in nature. They've got to come from underneath. It's got to be the people marking someone that the establishment won't mark. So they've always got this kind of rebellious streak to them, and they kind of need to be quite public, but a public way that not everyone is always going to understand exactly what it stands for, unless you kind of can read the clues. And London's full of them, and a huge number are devoted to rock stars. That's obvious reasons for that. Rock stars, people adore them. This is a picture of Freddie Mercury's old front door in West Kensington, and it's just kind of covered in graffiti. People go there all the time. He doesn't live there anymore, he's dead. But I don't know who does live there. Who knows what they think about this. There's one outside Amy Winehouse's house now in Camden Square.
Would you like to just pass them around so people can have a look?
Yeah, people can have a look.
You may not want to ever get them back.
No, I don't need them back. That's fine.
That's fine.
So yeah, there's one outside Amy Winehouse's house in Camden Square. It's interesting to speculate why some musicians get this treatment and others don't. Abbey Road has become a sort of shrine for Beatles fans, but there's nowhere like that for the Rolling Stones, and perhaps a shrine kind of needs some kind of magnetic, iconic location. And the Stones have never created that sort of relationship with London, even though they're Londoners and the Beatles weren't. I used to live near Abbey Road, and they have to repaint the wall there every 2 years or so. So much graffiti gets put on it, but I never saw anybody actually do it. It just kind of appears. It's really weird. One thing that's really always puzzled me is why Mark Bolan has a shrine. This is Mark Bolan's shrine here. So Mark Bolan crashed into a sycamore tree on Queen's Drive in Barnes, driving a Mini, or someone else was driving, and it killed him instantly. And people have been leaving flowers and notes there ever since. And there's also a statue now as well, which I don't really like because I kind of prefer it to be kind of unofficial. But I don't understand why it's Mark Bolan. I mean, I like T-Rex, but he doesn't. I don't understand what box he's ticked there for enough people that they feel they have to mark his death. And perhaps it's just because it's really violent. You know, people just love that. And the way they've chosen his tree, you know, this thing that killed him. It's kind of, it's just really macabre, and it makes me think of the Bill Hicks line that, you know, the last thing Jesus would want to see when he came back to earth with another bloody crucifix. And that kind of neatly brings us on to another kind of quite, well, incredibly macabre London shrine. And this is one of the religious ones. There's loads of religious shrines, but they're kind of usually quite boring. But this one really interests me. This is Bayswater Road in Marble Arch. Well, there's a very small convent. It's full of nuns. There's a lot of them. I think they're not allowed to leave they're not allowed to leave there ever. I don't know what. But and you can go there and they'll show you around. And in the basement there's a chapel, and the walls are covered in relics, ancient relics. And if you know your Catholic imagery, you know what that means. You know, a relic is a skin, it's bones, it's bits of fingernail, it's pieces of hair. They're all kind of like being plucked and pulled from these bodies. From like 350 Catholic martyrs who were hanged at the Tyburn Tree nearby at Marble Arch. And then behind the altar is a replica of the gallows itself, this kind of like three-sided thing that people were killed on. And it's just really weird, and it's kind of macabre, and it's medieval. And you go there, and there's this lovely old nun, and she's showing you her like favourite piece of like shriveled skin. I recommend it, I really do. And on a different note, there's a kind of another religious shrine is the canals of West London. I don't know if anybody knows the canals of West London, but I used to live on a boat, and whenever you went sort of west of Paddington, the closer you got to Southall, the more coconuts you'd find, just kind of floating in the canal. And I always wondered why that was, and friends would say, oh, it's a kind of Hindu thing. And I looked into it a bit more, and yeah, it is a Hindu thing. It's a religious ceremonies, and the canal kind of represents Ganges. And these are offerings to Ma Ganga, who symbolises Mother Earth, and also it's about the elixir of life, which is where water is where all life began. And the coconuts also have their own kind of symbolism. They're the fruit of the gods, a pure fruit with remarkable qualities. It takes in salt water and produces sweet fruit, and it's neatly packaged too. Also, it's a symbol of fertility. It reflects the womb and its human qualities. It has 2 eyes, a mouth, and hair. Again, I think it's kind of fascinating that this sort of symbolism has been transported hundreds of miles and across generations, and sort of created, you know, a shrine out of a fairly like stinky ditch in West London. I kind of talked a little bit about graffiti shrines in the Rockstar ones, and I wondered if there was a wall anywhere in London that people have kind of constantly draw to memorise death or something, and there probably are, but I think they're quite transient, these things, and they probably get painted over quite quickly. But London does have a lot of murals, which are kind of huge paintings. They're often commissioned by the council, so they're kind of official, but they're often done by kind of unofficial, like sort of street artists or left-wing artists. There's a guy called Brian Barnes who's done he's done dozens of them around London, and he's a proper old lefty. And these things kind of commemorate things like the Battle of Cable Street, and there's a Nuclear Dawn one in Brixton near me, which is amazing. And there's another one which is the War Memorial at Stockwell Tube, which is kind of painted over an old deep level tube station. And a lot of it is given over to Violet Sasbo, is that correct pronunciation? Who was she worked behind German lines in World War II, and she lived apparently in Stockwell for a while. But after Jean-Charles de Menezes was murdered by Met Police in July 2005, I think Brian Barnes wanted to kind of commemorate that on the War Memorial, and he painted his face on it, and a lot of people took exception to that. And it wasn't just the council took exception; it was also some of the other artists involved. They felt this wasn't a sort of suitable treatment of this War Memorial, and so he was painted out. But there is a sort of small mosaic and a shrine for de Menezes nearby, if anyone wants to see that. And then there's a really strange shrines. I had no idea until this week that there's a phone box near St Bart's Hospital which has been turned into a shrine to Sherlock Holmes. You knew this? after the TV show, which I've never seen, had him falling from the roof of the hospital. I don't know if there are any other shrines to fictional people who didn't really die anywhere else in the world. And it's kind of cool, but I do wonder if it's also a major publicity stunt. I don't know if anyone...
Well, there's another phone box in Heaven Street, which is...
the Bowie.
Stardust.
Yeah.
Ziggy Stardust is a...
Yes, he is a fictional character.
Killed off
This is true. And he didn't really die.
I went past some bars the other day, and the phone box has been cleaned up.
Yeah.
But people have written in the dirt of the windows.
Oh, really?
Lazarus Project, Sherlock Lives, Moriarty. It's all basically commemorates fanboys and girls.
Yeah.
Then people think we're crazy.
London's also got a skateboard shrine. I don't know if you know about this one. If you look over the side of Jubilee Footbridge, you can see dozens, well, more than dozens now. Well, no, it's still dozens, just more dozens. Broken skateboards lying on one of those immense concrete feet that anchor the bridge into the Thames. These are boards that have been broken during sessions in the on the South Bank Undercroft, and the skaters, you always see them, they're kind of always falling off and they smash their boards and they all say, "Oh, dude, that's so bad." And then they go and they sort of kind of, you know, they have a ceremonious chucking of the board over the side of the bridge, but not actually into the water, but you know, where people can still see it. And I quite like that. It's like, you know, people have always sort of given tribute to the Thames, but there's this kind of, you've got to also see it because, you know, because that's the way that the modern world is. You've got to see it. And then there's kind of my favourite. I don't know if it's favourite as a word. It's the saddest shrine, I think, in London. And that's partly because it doesn't really exist anymore. I used to see this all the time when I was walking around Farringdon. It's near sort of Mount Pleasant sorting office, and there are steps going up to the viaduct there. It's sort of on two levels. It's always kind of strange. And then up on the wall of one of the stairwells, it's pretty dank and kind of miserable. It's always damp there. You see a dozen or so spoons. They were stuck to the tiles. They're quite high up around the light. This is a kind of quite a rare photograph, I think, of it. I don't think it's mine. I don't think anyone's ever taken a picture of it.
Did the spoons die?
Did the spoons die? Well, I always wondered what it meant, and I think I always kind of also really knew. And then one day I walked past it and I took a picture and I asked on Twitter, does anyone know what this is all about? And a guy got back to me, and he worked in addiction services, and he says that they had all been placed there by heroin users in tribute to dead peers. You know, each shrine, each spoon was a departed soul. It was like a kind of farewell to their sort of fellow users. And that kind of summarises an urban shrine for me. It's sort of clandestine, it's seditious, it's violent, it's about sort of martyrdom, sort of self-martyrdom. It's about remembrance. It's kind of got a transcendental quality, if you believe in drugs giving you that kind of almost religious aspect to drugs. And then I realised I went there quite recently. Well, I went there last year to sort of have another look at them, and they were gone. They'd cleaned up the bridge, and all these spoons had just been kind of, you know, tidied away. And it was just like these people whose lives had never really meant anything anyway, apart from to the sort of fellow users, had just been kind of just erased completely from public memory. You know, they weren't even allowed to exist as a shrine anymore, and that made me pretty sad. It's a great note to end on, isn't it? Yeah.